Light of the world, you step down into darkness. Open my eyes, let me see beauty that made this heart.
As Jacob was coming up to lead the last song, he whispered in my ear, and but he told me it was all right to let everybody know. Not that he whispered in my ear, but that they're going to be moving. They have sold their house, that being the Mashingeti family. And I told him as he walked by, I go, you coward, you could have done this. It's hard for me to do it. It really is. Over the years, I have grown to appreciate and have a love for Jacob. Has he been trying? Oh, yeah, but trying in a good way as well. I remember when he and Darren would come and visit us. They were members at Venice at the time. And they would challenge, especially challenge Joy. And there got to be an interesting relationship developed. But then as Jacob married Amelia, the kids came along, the dynamic changed. And so I'm elated for him, but I'm sorry for us. They're going to be moving to Washington. Their house is sold. It's closing escrow, I believe, tomorrow. And they're going to be on their way. I'm going to miss Phoebe. She's only now started to smile at me. Last week, I think Amelia said she tried to say Bruce. That's a hard word to say. I'm going to miss Isaiah. And yes, Jacob and Amelia. So we wish them Godspeed in their move. Know it's going to be a challenge for them. It's got to be exciting. And we wish them well. And we'll continue to remember them in our prayers. And we'll truly miss a part that they provide to the congregation. As they leave, we're not going to be all together again, at least the way it was. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, trying to get it all together. It used to be in the 60s and 70s. People say, I need to get it together. Kind of still do it now, but it seems such an antiquated term and phraseology. But getting it all together, what do we mean when we talk about kind of getting it all together? Austin was talking about note-taking and things of that nature that he relies on. And what he wants to do is he wants to bring it all together. And so I see him back there when class is going on or when I'm preaching, and he's writing, taking notes. And I've saw his notebook a time or two, and he takes really good notes. And he's able to then come back and replicate what he had learned. A month ago when we had the men's class at the house, and he was sitting there and he was taking notes, talking about the various things, asking for clarification. I appreciate that because what he's wanting, what he's longing for, to be able to put it all together, to make cognitive sense out of it all. Go back into the book of John. And in John, we're going to go into the 4th chapter. And Jesus talks with the woman at the well, talks about getting it all together. See, the Samaritans, they really thought that they had it all together. In fact, the woman at the well even said, you Jews say. See, centuries before, during the time of Jeroboam and Rehoboam, Jeroboam took away 10 tribes, and he made a religion like unto the religion that the children of Israel had followed. And it was close. Oh, it was really close. But it wasn't the true religion. He set up places to worship as far as Bethel and Dan, not in Jerusalem. He established a priesthood, but not the one that was authorized by God. But it was close. And so as Jesus talks with this woman, he tells her it's important that you get back to the truth. It's important you get it all together. Notice what you can see on the overhead. John the 4th chapter, verses 23, 24. But an hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshipers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For such people, the Father seeks to be his worshipers. God is a spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and in truth. So what is it Jesus is trying to say? He's trying to say that we bring it all together, that we look deep inside of ourselves, tap in to ourselves, and realize that it's not just external. It's not just that part that is emotion, but it is that emotion that is driven by truth. I realize that our nation set aside today to honor mothers. And as we were driving down Winnetka, going south on Winnetka, we passed by a house where in the front yard is an explosion of stuffed animals and flowers, balloons, and other things. Go down a little bit further, and another house has the same things. And I sit back and I think, and I don't mean to demean anyone, but to stop when you're driving a car, put on the brakes in order to go through a ritual, to buy something. How empty is that? And see, that's sometimes how we go about our approach to God. We don't have the emotion that would prepare us for that which is to come. Rather, we slam on the brakes. We then think that this is going to suffice. Austin touched on it as we surrounded the table. He said what we have to do is we have to connect back to what it was Christ did. Well, in all the things that we do, especially in worship, we have to have an emotion driven from the heart, the intellect, the will, and the emotion, so that we give to God what he wants. And that is honest and true. No deviation from the pattern, no deviation whatsoever. Honestly, coming before him. See, because man down through time has always deviated from the pattern. Deviation. Because man wants to give to God what he wants rather than what God would have us to do. Think back into Genesis, the 4th chapter. And you see there that Cain, he offered a sacrifice. And he sincerely thought he was honoring God. He brought the finest from his crops, presented them before God. But God rejected it. He said, no, what I want is what I want. God was setting a principle right then that was showing that the life of the organism, physical and or spiritual, as it would play out, is in the blood. But Cain thought he was doing right. But see, there was no emotion. Because the emotion would have said, I've got to give God what he wants. Truly give God what he wants. Therefore, intellectually, God told me. And we know that God told. God is not a respecter of persons. So he wouldn't have told Abel one thing, Cain something else. He told him. But he said, I'm going to give God what I want to give. That's what I'm going to do. Cartoon in the paper today. Little boy. And he asked his mother, "What would you like for Mother's Day?" "Oh, I'd like you to eat your vegetables without me nagging you. And I would like you to clean your room without me telling you. I would like you to say please and thank you without being asked. That's what I would like." And then in the next caption, it shows the kid saying, "Okay, I'll go make you a card." In other words, I'm going to do what I want to do because it's what I want. Did he have it all together? No, because he was not listening. And unfortunately, a lot of times we don't listen. The Pharisees, Matthew, the 23rd chapter. "Woe to you, scribes, Pharisees, hypocrites! You tithe dill and mint and cumin, but you leave undone the weightier matters of the law, like grace and love and mercy." See, the Pharisees thought they had it all together. They were pious. I mean, their clothes were just right. They had the elongated phylacteries. People looked at them and, whoa, they basked in their splendor. But Jesus said, no, you don't have it all together. You tithe the smallest thing. I mean, try to weigh out dill and mint and cumin. There's no weight. But yet they go fastidiously, we've got to pay tithes on that. When they're neglecting this over here. Jesus said, this you should have done without neglecting the others. So we come back to us and we say, well, are we kind of sort of like that? Are we just kind of going on what we want and what everybody sees? Or is what we're giving to God a true reflection of what's going on in our heart? I can't answer that for you. I can only answer it for me. And so when I was even thinking about this lesson, I sat back and said, okay, how does this apply? Are you giving God what he wants? Have you got it all together? Or are you giving him something that is inferior? See, because what Jesus chastised the Pharisees on was their attitude was all wrong. They had closed their ears, shut their eyes, kind of like this little boy here, determined. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to see it. Some people's minds are like concrete, Alfred E. Newman said, all mixed up and permanently set. Well, spiritually, we can get that way. We can give God what we want, but it's not what he desires. In 2 Thessalonians, 2nd chapter, and verse 10, they did not receive the love of the truth so as to be saved. Their attitude was not right. Now, if you go into the 19th chapter of Matthew, you find an interesting story. And it's laid out for us so beautifully. But as you're turning over there, I want us to again contemplate on attitude and the wrong attitudes that are seen expressed across the denominational world. But let's not be myopic, because we see it in us as well. And what those attitudes are can be evidenced in just kind of the way we look at life. And I never would have thought that I would hear from a pulpit a preacher of the gospel of Jesus Christ talk about how one church is just as good as another. And I've heard it. And I go, whoa, Where did that come from? It negates Ephesians 4:4. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one body. The oneness. But see, that's attitude. I'm gonna go ahead and talk about it, and God will have to accept it. No. Only when it's all together in me is God going to accept me. And by the same token, I can't have the mindset that everybody's going to go to heaven. I can't. Because they're not. There's only one way. John 14, verse 6. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh to the Father but by me. Some translations have, but through me. Regardless. The only way for salvation is through Christ. The only place where Christ is as head over his body, which is the church. The only way to have access to the Father is through him. So when we talk about getting it all together, it involves these things and so much more. I know that a lot of people talk about you only have to be good and moral and you'll be saved. You've got to be good and moral. But good and morality is not the only thing. I mean, when you stop and think about Cornelius and his household, but we'll talk about him in a moment. But now I ask you to go over to Luke 19 or Matthew 19. So in Matthew 19, go down with me, if you would, into verse 16. Matthew 19, verse 16. One man came up to him and said, Teacher, what good thing shall I do that I may obtain eternal life? He said to him, why are you asking me about what is good? There's only one who is good. But if you wish to enter into life, keep the commandments. Man goes and says, which ones? Jesus said, you shall not commit murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness. Honor your father and mother. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Now, stop here a minute. That man would be equated as good and moral. That man, in the eyes of many, would be, man, that guy's saved. He's in great shape. But he realized something about himself. He said, all these things I've kept, what am I still lacking? By that statement, he's saying, I don't have it all together. I know there's something deficient. Have you ever made a meal and you're preparing the meal and you go, something's missing? What am I lacking? I do that a lot of times. I like to cook. Don't tell Linda I said that. But I don't mind. I actually do like to cook. But sometimes I'll make something and I'll go, oh, it's really lacking something. And other times I'll go way overboard. I make a tortellini salad, and it's Mediterranean scope. And you take tortellini and dice up pepperoni, black olives, sun-dried tomatoes. You mix it all up, and you mix it up with pesto. And there's some other ingredients that you throw in, chickpeas and others. And you put the pesto. And when you do it right, man, it's great. Tastes good. It's filling. Last time I made it, I soured myself because I looked at the jar of pesto I had and I said, I don't want to put it back in the refrigerator. I hate having bottles of this and that in the refrigerator. So I dumped the whole thing in. Whoa. No, it was terrible. Absolutely terrible. Linda, she said, no, no, no. I know how to fix this. We'll set it aside, put it in the freezer. When it comes time, we'll make more tortellini. We'll just mix it together. It still was bad. Still was bad. But see, that's the thing. We want to have it just right. Not too much, not too little, not over the top. We want to have it all together. This man knew he didn't. What am I lacking? What did I put too much of? That was the Pharisees. What am I lacking? Jesus said to him, because he knew he was a man of wealth. If you wish to be complete, verse 21, go and sell your possessions. Give to the poor. You shall have treasure in heaven, and come follow me. 22, when the young man heard this statement, he went away grieved, for he was one who owned much property. Grieved. See, his heart was not in tune. We talked in class this morning about stewardship of money. We discussed it. We didn't get all the way through. We're looking at the book of Proverbs and Solomon's teaching on money. Money is not bad. Money is not bad. I asked somebody for $100 in class today so I could use it as a demonstration. Then I asked for 50. You think any of these people would whip out even a 50? No. I didn't want to ask for a 20 because I knew I had a 5. I didn't think I had it, and I was feeling my pocket. I don't know where this $5 came from. Who wants it? None of you are going to raise your hand because you realize, it ain't worth getting up and going again. But money is neither good nor bad nor indifferent. But the problem was, this man wasn't willing to put it all together. His attitude with his actions. I've been thinking a lot about something I read, and it deals with what's referred to as undigested knowledge, And it was applied by Oliphant, and he wrote a book in the 1800s talking about people who know the right answer, but yet don't live a life consistent with it. And I was thinking about it. I'm writing a little article for our bulletin. And I thought of Isaac Asimov. You know him? You've heard of him? He's written over 500 books and or edited them, one of which is a guide to the Bible. But Asimov, by his own description, is an atheist. How can an atheist write a book about a guide to the Bible? Mind-boggling. Asimov is a member of Mensa, or was. He read the Bible, he claims, several times. So what he has is knowledge, but it is undigested. Does not do any good unless you apply it. And that's what we're talking about. The application of what we know. Getting it together attitudinally and everything else. Are you willing to pay the cost of discipleship? Luke 14th chapter. Because in Luke the 14th chapter is laid out a really positive mindset and attitude. For the mind set on the flesh is death, Paul writes in Romans, the 8th chapter. But the mindset on the spirit is life and peace. We want to have the right attitude. We've been looking at Proverbs and Ecclesiastes and the other books of wisdom for quite some time. And so when you begin to really appreciate what it is Solomon is saying. It fits like hand in glove with what Christ teaches, because they're talking about the same thing, having the right attitude before God and then putting it into practice. Look at Proverbs 2nd chapter, verse 2 beginning. Make your ear attentive to wisdom. Incline your heart to understanding. For if you cry for discernment, lift your voice for understanding. If you seek her as silver, search for her as for hidden treasures. Then you'll discern the fear of the Lord. Discover the knowledge of God. You're going to look at it. You're going to take it in. And you're going to respond to it. You're going to get it all together. That young man, he had inclination. What must I do? But also notice where we read. He said, what good thing? Notice the singularness. What good thing? I'm not willing to do whatever it takes. Tell me the one thing, and I'll do it. I had a student one time, I was handing out syllabus. I've told you this previously, but I'll stir you up by way of reminder. But I was handing out syllabus for the class. She turned and looked at me and said, Professor Evans, what do I have to do to get a C? In the back of my mind, I said, you're going to see what you have to work for. Because that's all I gave her. The only thing she wanted was a C. And I made her work really hard for that C. It was an easy class. Easy. Study skills. How hard is that? But I made her work hard. And after she got the C, she came and talked to me because I was going to have her for another class. And she said, how come I only got a C? That was such an easy class. You made me work hard. Why? Because that's all you wanted. You told me what you wanted. Now, here's the syllabus for the new class. What kind of grade do you want? And she did not answer. But what she was doing was the same thing the young man did. What good thing? I just want to squeak on by. That's not the way to approach life. And it is definitely not the way to approach a relationship with the God of heaven. Look back at the book of Acts, the 8th chapter. You find the Ethiopian eunuch returning back home to Ethiopia after having gone up apparently to Jerusalem to observe the Passover. And as he's traveling, you realize that he's a proselyte and one converted to Judaism. He's reading from the book of Isaiah, Isaiah 53. Philip joins himself to the chariot. The eunuch says, of whom does the prophet, well, Philip said, do you understand what you're reading? The eunuch said, no. Of whom does the prophet speak? Of himself or another? From that passage, Philip preached him Jesus Christ, him crucified. As they're going along, they see water. Eunuch cries out, look, water, what prevents me from being baptized? Now that man was religious. He thought what he was doing was right. He traveled a great distance to fulfill what he thought was the correct thing. But what you appreciate about him is his honesty, his open honesty. He realized he didn't have it all together. Once Philip told him, I need to be baptized. I don't want to hesitate. I don't want to hesitate. Honesty. He got it all together. The right combination. And it brought about results. Over in the book of Acts, the 10th chapter. Begin reading in verse 1. And you read about Cornelius. He was longing to serve the God of heaven. But he wasn't He hadn't, and he longed. And God directed Peter to go and talk to him. Peter came before him and said, now I most assuredly understand that God is not a respecter of persons. And Peter preached to him Jesus Christ and him crucified. Cornelius had gathered together his whole household to come and hear what Peter had to say. Now Cornelius was recognized as a good moral man. He was well spoken of, gave alms to the Jewish people. He was an Italian, he was a Gentile. And that's why Peter said, I most assuredly understand now. He realized that there was something lacking. He sent for Peter to come and speak to me. Something's lacking in my life. And he responded, and he obeyed the gospel. He brought it all together. The Bereans did the same thing as Paul was traveling around. They heard, they searched and examined to make certain that what was being told them was truth. Then they obeyed. But see, they had a desire. And the desire was for truth, nothing else. That attitude prompted them to obey the gospel. They were more noble-minded than those in Thessalonica. They searched out the scriptures. Now the question arises to us. We may have put on Christ in the waters of baptism. We may think that we have it all together. But the question remains for each one of us to ask. Are we giving to God what he wants? Are we coming before him with the right attitude? Are we being motivated for the right reason? Are we worshiping God in spirit and in truth? Or are we simply going through will worship? Once you find what it is you're looking for, the ultimate, which is Christ, you're willing to give up everything in order to lay hold of him. Everything. Matthew, the 13th chapter, talks about the merchant seeking the pearl of great price, travels far and wide. When he finds it, he gives up everything in order to take possession of it. My search for truth took me far and wide. Study of many religions. I mean, Shintoism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Zoroastrian, Baha'i, all of them I looked at. Yeah, even Catholicism for about that long. When Linda and I were going to get married, she wanted to get married in the Catholic Church. So we had to go and take classes. Met with the priest one time. He said, don't come back. Don't come back. He said, I don't want to deal with you. Never went back to another class. I'm not proud what I did later on, but I realized Catholicism wasn't it. I was raised a free Methodist. That wasn't it. Charismatic movement was not it. But you open the scriptures. That's it. That's it. That gets it all together. Now it's up to me because God had it all together. God's outlined it. The recipe's there. Now I have to take it. I have to feed on the word. I have to digest it. And then I have to put it into practice. That's what we're talking about putting it all together. Is it seen in my life? Am I living a life reflective of what I've come to understand, what I've seen in God's word, getting it all together. It's going to be a lifelong endeavor, constantly searching, constantly looking, but with each day growing ideally stronger and stronger in service. Can anyone really say they have it together? It's a work in progress. And I challenge you to be about that work, to constantly look at yourself, examine, refine, and come in alliance with God's word. If you're here this morning and not a child of God, we'd love nothing more than to sit down, study with you, show you not what we think, but rather what God's word says. To open up the scriptures, like Philip did with the Ethiopian eunuch, and simply teach you Jesus Christ, him crucified. Then you know that you would need to be baptized for the remission of sins, to emerge to walk in newness of life, then growing each and every day, emotionally realizing what it is that God has done for you. The song that, one of the songs Jacob led us in the singing, it was written by, RJ did the music for it. Was it Don Alexander or Dane Shepherd? One of them, who many of us know. But it talked about how I'm so thankful that I'm now a child of God. Because I'm a child of God, I want to live reflective of that. I wear the name and I'm proud. Getting it all together. And so maybe you've done that at one time. Put on Christ in the waters of baptism. But you need the prayers of the congregation for strength and or encouragement. If there's any way we can be of spiritual assistance,